Part 9. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 83. When they came to the next floor again, they did not go downstairs or walk out of the stairs to check. Zhao Li stood still, closed his eyes and concentrated for a moment, then moved the energy in his body to his palms. A dragon of energy gradually condensed and appeared between his palms, and gradually grew stronger as it meandered. Finally, after reaching the limit, Zhao Li pushed out with both palms. Ang! Accompanied by a loud dragon roar, the dragon between his palms suddenly rushed out quickly and crashed directly into the corridor below. Boom! With a loud noise, the whole corridor shook, and even the space in front of them began to distort. Looking at the distorted space in front, Yujukan and others were all delighted. Unfortunately, the distorted space did not break in the end. Instead, it gradually recovered after reaching the limit, which made everyone disappointed. Ang! Zhao Li once again tried his best to attack, but in a hurry, the intensity of his attack was naturally not as good as the attack after charging. Even if they attacked the already distorted space, it would only make it more distorted, and there was still a long distance from the real broken space. Now, everyone was completely desperate. However, at this moment, boom! Crack! A dull loud noise suddenly came from the place where the space was distorted, and the distorted space was completely broken, revealing the real staircase below. However, everyone did not show much joy, but looked down vigilantly. Because there was a group of people in uniforms in the stairs below, looking at them in great surprise. Are you students from this school? Seeing the school uniforms on Yujukan and others, one of the people in uniforms frowned slightly and asked. Hearing the question from the opposite side, Yujukan and others were obviously relieved. Since they asked out loud, they should be human. Anyway, the red-clothed female ghost they saw did not make any other sounds except for the sinister laughter, let alone communicate with each other. Yes. Who are you? However, despite this, Yujukan still looked at the other party with vigilance and asked carefully. Seeing that the other party was wearing a uniform, they should be from the same organization, but I don't know the details, are they good or evil? Hello, my name is Zopeng, we belong to the Shenzhou Special Supernatural Bureau, specializing in dealing with supernatural events. One of them said as he came close to Yujukan and took out a certificate and asked them to check it. Yujukan took the certificate in a daze, and looked down at it seriously. Is it true? Zhao Li came closer, bumped Yujukan with his shoulder, and asked in a low voice. Yujukan squeaked and whispered vaguely, and then handed the certificate back. As for the authenticity of the certificate? Sorry. Yujukan's parents, although they are also wealthy businessmen, don't know if they have ever been exposed to these things. But Yujukan, in essence, is just an ordinary college student now. How could he recognize this kind of certificate that obviously belongs to the secret department? When hearing Yujukan's answer, Zhao Li, Zhang Wuxiao and others were obviously relieved. Seeing the appearance of the crowd, Yujukan wanted to say something, but he didn't say it in the end. Who knows who these people are? What if he speaks casually and asks these people to kill and silence them? No matter whether they are true or false, as long as they treat them as if they are true, looking at the appearance of the people opposite, they should not do anything to them. Yujukan muttered to himself. Why are you here? The man named Zopeng took the certificate and looked at Yujukan and others and asked again. We. Although it is impossible to tell whether the certificate is true or false, based on their current performance, at least they should not belong to that kind of evil organization. Moreover, there is nothing to hide. Therefore, Yujukan narrated what happened in detail. After listening to Yujukan's story, the faces of the uniformed people gradually became ugly. Some of them even snorted coldly, staring at Zhang Wuxiao with dissatisfaction, and even revealed a hint of disgust. You guys. Although the corridor was dim, Zhang Wuxiao still felt the dissatisfaction of the crowd. He couldn't help but speak with an ugly face and staggered back. Okay. Let's find a way to seal the evil ghost first. One of the people on the opposite side, although dissatisfied with Zhang Wuxiao's actions, still waved his hand to stop the slightly angry crowd. Now is not the time to pursue responsibility. The most important thing now is to find a way to seal the evil ghost. Speaking of which, the power of the evil ghost is not that strong. However, the most difficult and troublesome thing about it is its immortality and infinite rebirth ability. I don't know if we can help. Looking at the frowning face of the person on the opposite side, Yu Jukan couldn't help but speak. You guys. The person on the other side was obviously stunned, and then couldn't help laughing. Ha, no need, this is our duty, you just need to study hard now. The man named Zhou Peng couldn't help but smile and shake his head. You look down on us. They were all a group of students who had never been out of school. They were in their prime of life. Yu Zhihan, Zhao Eli, and others immediately showed dissatisfied looks. Even the three girls, and Yan Ran, were also slightly dissatisfied. Although we don't know the art of sealing, it's still easy to hold down that red-clothed ghost and even kill it. Well, it's just that it will be reborn again. Oh. Really? Looking at the obviously disinterested expression of the person opposite, the anger in the hearts of several people suddenly jumped up. Zhao Li no longer cared about anything else and directly mobilized the energy in his body. Dots of fluorescent light rose up and gathered in his hands, turning into a small swimming dragon, circling and swimming in his palms. How is this possible? The members of the Supernatural Bureau, who originally had a calm face and even a smile on their faces, suddenly widened their eyes, looked at Zhao Li in disbelief, and exclaimed. Ah! What's wrong? Is there any problem? Zhao Li, who was startled by the reaction of the members of the Supernatural Bureau, couldn't help but shrink his palms, and more energy poured into his palms. The dragon swimming and circling between his palms instantly swelled in size. What's wrong? How did you do this? Zhou Peng stared at Zhao Li with bright eyes, asked an inexplicable question, and then asked hurriedly with an excited expression. Isn't this just releasing the energy? Can't you? Then how do you seal that fierce ghost? Looking at the reaction of the people from the Supernatural Bureau, Zhao Li already felt a little regretful, wondering if he had been too reckless. Zhou Peng, please step back first. Since the children want to help, let's talk while walking. The person from the Supernatural Bureau who had stopped everyone before spoke again. With the size of the country, it is naturally impossible for the supernatural events that have occurred frequently recently not to be discovered. In fact, all the countries in Blue Star are trying their best to study countermeasures. When the supernatural incident broke out, the first thing that all countries thought of was not to deal with it with technological means, but with ancient myths and legends. For example, Taoist priests and monks from China, as well as wizards, magicians, exorcists, etc. from other countries, and even gods, immortals, and Buddhas from various countries. However, it turns out that although there have been supernatural events on Blue Star, other legends are really just legends. They are all just false imaginations and do not possess real extraordinary power. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 84. After Zhao Li took back the released Vitality Dragon, everyone came to the third floor again. While the people from the Supernatural Bureau were preparing, the person who stopped Zhou Peng, the captain of this team, named Zhou Hongli, was also introducing some of the current situation to Yu Zhihan and others. In fact, a few months ago, supernatural events continued to occur throughout Blue Star. However, they were suppressed by various countries on Blue Star, so they did not spread. Otherwise, I'm afraid it would have spread a lot and made people panic. Of course, In addition to this, the most important thing is that these supernatural events often appear in a certain place and do not spread everywhere. Although in fact, these areas where supernatural events occur are also expanding little by little. However, its expansion speed is extremely slow and will not have much impact in a short period of time. As for these supernatural events, as well as the weird and evil ghosts in them, the country has also summarized some rules through the sacrifice of a large number of people. Although technological weapons cannot cause harm to these strange and fierce ghosts. However, a person's absolutely firm will and belief can actually influence these weird and powerful ghosts. It can even ban some weak, strange, and evil ghosts with its spiritual will. There are even people who, according to the descriptions in some supernatural novels, seal some weird and powerful ghosts in their bodies to achieve the purpose of using weird power to fight against the weird. Although the two are not essentially the same, they also have great similarities. The people in the Supernatural Bureau are naturally a group of people who have weird and powerful ghosts sealed in their bodies, or who have strong spiritual will and can barely compete with and influence weird and powerful ghosts with their spiritual will. Of course, sealing weird and powerful ghosts into the body will definitely not have no impact, and it can even be said to have a great impact. As long as there is any laxity or loophole in the individual's spiritual will, it will lead to strange and evil spirits in the body, causing the person to become insane, crazy, or even directly brain dead. And if it is in an area where supernatural events occur, it will be affected by the strange and powerful ghosts in the body, and then turn into terrifying and strange monsters. And when using the weird and ghostly power in the body, it is naturally more susceptible to the erosion of the weird and ghostly power. Especially when you first use strange and ghostly powers, your mental will is suddenly impacted, and it is extremely easy to make mistakes. Therefore, they were so angry after knowing that this incident was caused by Zhang Wuxiao and others. Because every time they use strange and ghostly powers, they will be one step closer to losing control and dying. Because of this, everyone was so excited after seeing Zhao Li's power form. That power is obviously very different from everyone else's ability to seal weird and powerful ghosts. Even if it is different from the legendary cultivation method, it should be forced to borrow the power of weird and powerful ghosts. After introducing the general situation of Blue Star, the group of people from the Supernatural Bureau looked expectantly at Yu Zhichen and others. This. Facing everyone's gaze, Yu Zhichen, Zhao Li and others immediately hesitated. In the end, Yu Zhichen gritted his teeth and gave a brief summary of the situation of several people. As he spoke, the eyes of the Supernatural Bureau team became brighter and brighter. As for whether this technique can be passed on to others, we still need to ask the elders. After hesitating for a long time, Yu Zhichen finally said the last words. In fact, although he is only a college student, Yu Zhichen is not a fool. After hearing about Blue Star's current situation, he already knew that the skills in his and others' hands might not be preserved. Understood. Understood. This is what it should be. As for what Yu Zhichen said at the end, that they need to ask their elders, everyone nodded to express their understanding, but their attitude towards Yu Zhichen and others was a little more eager. Well, you ask, since there are real cultivation techniques, do the legendary gods, heaven and underworld really exist? Suddenly, Zhao Li suddenly spoke. This. For a moment, everyone looked at each other, not knowing how to answer. But they were all calculated in their minds. Thinking about the legendary heaven, the underworld, and the ghost missions that seduced souls and captured evil ghosts made them excited. If those existences really existed, then the strange and vicious ghosts appearing all over Blue Star now would be nothing. In the space invisible to the naked eye, the rich spiritual energy of heaven and earth has filled this small world. In addition to the spiritual energy of heaven and earth consumed and spread by Yu Zhichen and others, every time they kill a red-clothed devil, a large amount of energy will be swallowed up by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and transformed into new spiritual energy particles. Now, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth has filled every corner of this small world. And as everyone's thoughts fluctuated, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth around everyone fluctuated violently, while constantly moving closer to everyone. It is also constantly devouring the scattered mental fragments and messy thoughts of everyone, and through its connection with the ancient world, it transfers these spiritual fragments to the ancient world. Yuan Meng, who had been watching this small world through the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, suddenly withdrew his gaze and looked at a place in the prehistoric world. Well, as the extension of Yuan Meng's power, the place where the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is where his eyes and ears can reach. When Yu Jukan and others entered this small world and used their energy to fight, Yuan Meng had already noticed it. After all, there are only a few people who have the spiritual energy of heaven and earth now. Such a violent fluctuation of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth naturally attracted Yuan Meng's attention at the first time. And everything that happened afterwards was naturally under Yuan Meng's attention. However, that's all. Although he can observe some of the situations here through the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, he has no way to take action directly. It is also because of this that when Tang Yuping was almost killed, he could only watch. Later, when the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was dense to a certain extent, Yuan Meng was ready to help Yu Jukan and others to break the red-clothed ghost and the other dimensional space formed by this small world. But he didn't expect that those people from the spiritual bureau also rushed here at this time, and broke the other dimensional space in one fell swoop under the joint attack from inside and outside. At this point, the matter was basically over. However, with the questions raised by Zhao Li, the floating of everyone's inner thoughts caused the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, which was already very susceptible to the influence of the will of the mind, to spontaneously gather around everyone, devouring and transferring the spiritual fragments of everyone. Although it is very easy to resonate with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth for the spiritual consciousness fragments from the mind. But in fact, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth cannot completely devour and integrate the spiritual consciousness fragments. Most of them will transfer them to the prehistoric world according to instinct. Today's spiritual energy of heaven and earth, after repeated evolutions in the prehistoric world, still cannot exist in the real world. However, it also has some characteristics of the prehistoric world. For example, it will combine the negative energy after the destruction of the evil ghost, and then derive the spiritual energy of heaven and earth with yin attributes. For another example, for some spiritual consciousness bodies, they will also instinctively transfer them to the prehistoric world. After all, according to the legend, spiritual consciousness bodies are ghosts and ghosts, so they naturally need to enter the prehistoric world. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 85. In theory, the fragments of spiritual consciousness and messy thoughts emitted by everyone's mind are not actually considered spiritual consciousness bodies. Naturally, those simple fragments of spiritual consciousness and messy thoughts are not considered ghosts. However, it depends on who you compare them with. At the level of the current prehistoric world, even ordinary fragments of spiritual consciousness are stronger than the ghosts created by Yuan Meng and others at the beginning. And how fast does a person's thoughts turn? I'm afraid that in a moment, countless thoughts have turned. These kinds of thoughts, when they cannot be kept inward, will be scattered to the outside world in large quantities. Like some legendary mind-reading techniques, except for those truly great masters, most of them read some information contained in these spiritual thoughts that are scattered to the outside world. So, when Zhao Li mentioned immortals, gods, heaven, and the netherworld, although it was only a short moment, but everyone's thoughts have turned countless thoughts, and naturally there are countless fragments of thoughts scattered out. All these fragmented and scattered spiritual consciousness fragments were transferred to the prehistoric world by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. And the countless scattered information in these spiritual consciousness fragments was instantly read and analyzed by the prehistoric world. And these information, without the intervention of Xuanhuan, Tianzun, and others, was natural, under the joint action of the power contained in these spiritual consciousnesses and the prehistoric world. According to their mutual nature and instincts, they merged together and turned into two light balls, one large and one small, with endless stars, and escaped into the depths of the time and space dimensions of the prehistoric heaven and earth. In just a moment, a looming world with fairy mountains and blessed lands, jade buildings, has slowly emerged and unfolded in the depths of the time and space dimensions of the heaven. However, perhaps because of insufficient power, without the intervention of Xuanhuan and Tianzun, it was not able to absorb the spiritual energy of the prehistoric world on a large scale to evolve a real world. It just absorbed a small amount of spiritual energy from the heaven and earth, making this virtual image of heaven and earth completely stable. In the depths of the space-time dimension in the prehistoric land, a gloomy and dark world slowly formed at the same time. Although Xuanhuan and the Hades did not intervene. However, the power it obtained seemed to be stronger. After Puyi was formed, it began to devour the spiritual energy of the heaven and earth in the prehistoric land. One area after another, in this gloomy and dark world, quickly solidified. Ghost Gate, Yellow Spring Road, Bianhua, Wangchuan River, Nehi Bridge. All the scenes belonging to the netherworld in the legend are all presented in this world. There are also phantoms, which appear in the netherworld, the 10 kings of hell, the judge of the underworld, the black and white impermanence, the soul-catching messenger, etc. And all of this is naturally the information contained in the fragments of spiritual consciousness scattered by Yujukan and others. At the beginning, only Yujukan and the other 5 people had an impression of the East Sea and the Zilong. In the depths of the East Sea in the prehistoric world, they devoured and merged the endless spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and gave birth to the first creature in the prehistoric world, Zilong. Now, there are more than a dozen people. Under the excitement of their minds, the spiritual fragments that escaped are naturally more massive. If it were in the real world, well, it would be impossible for spiritual fragments to escape. Even in this small world with relatively loose rules, these spiritual fragments would only merge into a weird monster with a confused mind. However, it is completely different in the prehistoric world. First of all, the prehistoric world is an idealistic energy world, which is easily affected by the power of the mind. Secondly, the level of the prehistoric world is far lower than that of the real world. The spiritual fragments of human beings in the real world are equivalent to the innate sacred spiritual reflection for the low-dimensional prehistoric world, which is enough to affect such a large area. And Yujukan and the others, pointing to the relatively unified spiritual consciousness fragments fusion, made this kind of spiritual power increase geometrically. In just a moment, 2 worlds have been opened up in the depths of the time and space dimensions of the prehistoric heaven and earth. Because of the environment in which everyone is in, what they think about in their hearts is naturally more about the netherworld, and they think less about the legendary heaven and fairyland. This also caused that in the depths of the time and space dimensions of the prehistoric heaven, the newly born heaven and fairyland only formed a virtual shadow of heaven and earth. As for the heavenly officials, immortals, and emperors, they naturally did not even have virtual shadows. In the depths of the time and space dimensions of the prehistoric earth, the netherworld world that was born, on the contrary, quickly evolved, and even many virtual shadows of yin gods were born. Well, it was just the virtual shadow of yin gods, not to mention the power of yin gods. Even the most basic spiritual wisdom and a trace of power did not exist. Just when Xuanhuan was quite regretful, something surprising happened. I saw that the many phantoms of ghost officials that were shuttling back and forth between the Ghost Gate and the Yellow Springs Road suddenly gathered together at this moment, and finally merged into the figure of a ghost official holding a soul-catching rope. After the ghost messenger solidified, he looked around blankly, and then followed his instinct to walk along the yellow spring road towards the gate of hell. The moment the ghost messenger solidified, Yuan Meng's eyes were instantly cast over. In a moment, Yuan Meng had already understood everything about the ghost messenger clearly. Well, how to say it? From the outside, this ghost messenger did not look any different. He was surrounded by yin energy, holding a soul-catching rope, and his expression was unusually cold. But his mind was a chaotic haze, and he did not have a clear understanding. He just had the mechanical instinct of the ghost messenger to catch souls. Yuan Meng, including the eyes of the three people of Tianzun, were all watching this ghost messenger, the number one in the three realms of the prehistoric world, to see how he would act. The ghost messenger mechanically walked along the yellow spring road towards the gate of hell. Although his steps seemed mechanical and slow, when he took a step, it seemed to have crossed the infinite space and appeared directly in a very far place. The seemingly endless Yellow Springs Road was completed in just a few steps. However, this was not the magical power of the ghost, but the effect of the Yellow Springs Road under his feet. When the ghost walked, the Yellow Springs Road would naturally generate a force that acted on the ghost, allowing it to cross the long distance of the Yellow Springs Road. This was normal. If the extremely long Yellow Springs Road really required a group of ghosts to walk forward, then its efficiency in seducing souls would be too long and low. When the ghost came to the end of the Yellow Springs Road, after the ghost gate, the originally closed door opened silently at this moment. At this moment, the opened ghost gate seemed to connect different time and space dimensions. The ghost who stepped out of the ghost gate disappeared without a trace in an instant, as if he had entered another dimension of time and space. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 86. Okay. Let's not think about those things for now. No matter whether the legendary heaven and hell exist, they are not something we can touch now. What we have to do now is to reseal the evil spirits here to prevent uninformed people from coming in and being harmed by the evil spirits. Well, and search here carefully to see if the other missing people are still alive. That being said, in fact, everyone knew in their hearts that the other missing people were basically unlikely to be alive. However, despite this, Zhang Wuxiao still cast a grateful look at Zhou Hongli, the team leader who was speaking. The others were silent for a while, and put away their excitement because of seeing the legendary practice method, and carefully arranged again. After all, the practice method of Yujukan and others is stronger than the method of sealing ghosts. But that is also a matter of the future. Now, everyone still has to use the power of the sealed evil spirits. No matter how cautious they are, it is not too much. If one knew that there were indeed cultivation methods in the world, but died on the spot because of his own negligence, then he would really die with regret and unwilling to accept it. After all, it was the evil ghost that had sealed this place. Everyone acted in an orderly manner and moved to every corner of the small world at a very fast speed. To seal the evil ghosts in this small world, it is naturally impossible to simply kill or seal the evil ghosts as the legend says. After all, these strange and evil ghosts in the small world are not simple ghosts. They are the rules of the small world, absorbing the thoughts of people and creating a chaotic world consciousness. Although because of the special birth, it cannot really mobilize the power of the entire small world. In addition to the strange actions and sharp attacks, its own strength, defense, etc. are all weak. However, although its power is weak, it is ultimately the will of the pseudo-world. Naturally, it can shuttle and reborn at will within the scope of the small world. Simply killing and sealing it is completely meaningless. Therefore, if you want to completely seal a strange or evil ghost, you need to start from the entire small world. As for the strange and evil ghosts sealed by everyone's body, they are not really strange or evil ghosts, but only the chaotic negative power of strange and evil ghosts. The main bodies of those strange and evil ghosts are still in their original small world. As the arrangements of the people in the Supernatural Bureau were completed, waves of power rose from everyone's body. In the end, everyone's power was connected and covered the entire small world. In an instant, different powers began to collide and stir, and the faint spiritual light flickered in the entire small world. Finally, a scarlet figure emerged. "Kill it!" The moment he saw the red figure, the captain of the supernatural team shouted suddenly. "I'll do it!" Zhao Eli, who had been eager to move for a long time, took a step forward in an instant, and a strong Yuan force rose in his palm. Ang! Accompanied by a clear dragon roar, a pale golden dragon suddenly rushed out, bearing its fangs and claws, and directly passed through the red-clothed figure. And under Zhao Li's control, the pale golden dragon kept circling and entwining around the red-clothed figure, penetrating back and forth. Ah! Puff! Finally, in a shrill cry, the red-clothed figure collapsed again, turned into a ball of negative energy, and was once again transformed into spiritual particles by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. And the pale golden dragon, which had shrunk a lot, was recalled by Zhao Li and merged into his body again. At this time, everyone in the spiritual bureau had a ferocious look on their faces, trying their best to maintain a stable output of energy. Every move of the pale golden dragon played by Zhao Li would not only cause fatal damage to the red-clothed ghost, but also be a big test for everyone in the spiritual bureau. After all, they are forces of different systems, and conflicts will naturally arise between them. As for the problem that the Yuan Li in Zhao Li's body is much worse than the power in the real world because the level of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is not high. The power in the bodies of the people in the supernatural bureau is nothing more than the remnants of the weird and evil ghost power, plus the collection of everyone's spiritual will. The two are the same. As for the red-clothed evil ghost, it is just some human spiritual fragments, combined with the rules of the small world, forming a mechanical pseudo-world consciousness. There is almost no power in the small world that can be borrowed, but it has the ability to be immortal and constantly absorb the human spirit to grow stronger. Therefore, whether it is Yujukan and others, or the people in the supernatural bureau, they all have the ability to kill the red-clothed evil ghost. And when Zhao Li recalled the pale golden dragon, the faces of the people in the supernatural bureau looked a little better. To be honest, after Zhao Li took action, everyone regretted it, but the thing had already happened, so they could only persevere. Fortunately, although there were some mistakes in the process, they finally persevered. It was at this time that everyone had the energy to communicate the rules of this small world with their own spiritual will. Well, it should be said that they communicated the shallow scattered rules of this small world, which was more superficial than the red ghost. However, this was enough. I saw that as everyone moved, the power that originally diffused from everyone's body. It began to transfer from the bodies of several people to the little world, absorbing the power of the little world to replenish the loss of power covering the entire little world. I saw the red-clothed fierce ghost who had already begun to regenerate after being killed. At this time, it has been in an illusory state. It cannot truly solidify and come to the real world. Instead, it is firmly sealed outside the real world by the power that covers the entire small world, and cannot escape at all. After all, they are all low-level spiritual powers. With the help of human spiritual will and the power of ghosts, it is indeed possible to fight against the red-clothed ghosts who manifest the pseudo-will of heaven and earth to a certain extent. Speaking of which, this can be regarded as a different kind of man-conquering nature. However, neither the red-clothed fierce ghost with the pseudo-will of heaven and earth nor the small world itself can be compared with the real world. As for the people who defeat the sky, they are just a few people from the supernatural bureau, and they are not really defeating the sky, they can only be regarded as sealing the sky. But the red-clothed fierce ghost who was banned from the real world was in a state of neither life nor death. There is no real death, but there is no real rebirth. The power in the body, which was not powerful to begin with, is even more difficult to mobilize at this time, which can be said to be extremely uncomfortable. Looking at the red-clothed figure who was ferocious but illusory and could not be completely reborn into the world, everyone let out a long sigh of relief, finally getting it done. Okay, this evil ghost can't be reborn now. Let's go find your roommates now and see if any of them have survived. Zhang Wuxiao, who was dazzled by the scene of everyone banning the evil spirits, suddenly came back to his senses when he heard these words and ran towards the classroom on the third floor. At this time, because Li Gui was banned, the layers of alien space covering the entire third floor of the experiment had already collapsed and dissipated, and the place where everyone stood was already the real space. If other people are still alive, they can naturally be found. Well, after death, the body can also be found. Hey! Looking at the reckless Zhang Wei's smile, Yu Zhichuan stretched out his hand and was about to say something, but in the end he just shook his head and did not stop him. Now that the evil spirit has been sealed, there should be no danger here. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 87. Puff. Zhang Wuxiao, who had just arrived at the door of a classroom, stared blankly at the figure in front of him, then slowly lowered his head and looked at the palm, or claw, that had sunk into his chest. A series of meaningless sounds came out of his mouth, and Zhang Wuxiao's body slowly fell down, gradually becoming silent. Boss. This sudden change immediately stunned Yu Zhichuan and others, but they also came back to their senses in an instant and rushed forward. Ang. While running forward, Yu Zhichuan's Yuanli in his body surged and boiled, and a dragon emitting a bright spiritual light burst out from his palm and flew towards the door of the classroom. However, the Yuankai dragon, although it knocked away the figure that killed Zhang Wuxiao, did not really kill it. This figure was more than 2 meters, nearly 3 meters tall, and even had to hunch over slightly when standing in the classroom of the experimental building. This figure was also blood red all over. Well, it was real blood red, like a ghost with its skin peeled off. One could even see the dark red and purple blood vessels pulsating slightly. From the completely exposed muscles and blood vessels, there were traces of blood constantly oozing out, but it did not drip completely, but just flowed on the surface of the figure, making it look bloody and weird. And this figure had 8 legs, 8 arms, and 4 heads, as if 4 people were forcibly fused together. The heads looked like 2 men and 2 women. The heads of the 2 men were the other 2 people in Yu Zhichuan's dormitory. And the heads of the 2 women should be the other 2 girls. At this moment, there was no need for everyone to look for it anymore. It seemed that the rest of the people should be here. At this time, the 4 heads of this monster were looking at everyone with pain and hideousness. Their expressions were full of fierce resentment, but also with a hint of desire. Roar. The monster that was knocked to the ground by the Yuankai dragon slowly got up and roared at everyone with a low and angry roar. The 4 heads of the monster also spoke at the same time. The voices of men and women overlapped, noisy and weird. Hee hee. Ha ha. Come on, come quickly, come and join us. Save me. Save me. Ah Cheng, save me quickly. Ah. Why? Why? Why don't you come together? Why don't you come together? Why isn't it you who died? Why isn't it you who died? The pleading for help and the resentful questioning filled Yu Zhichuan's mind, almost driving him crazy. Humph. You're looking for death yourself, and you're still blaming others. At this moment, Yan Ran, who came later, snorted coldly, and a blue UN force surged from her body, instantly enveloping everyone inside, isolating the weird voice outside, and soothing the irritability in everyone's hearts. Yu Zhichuan breathed a sigh of relief, nodded to Yan Ran and the people who came later, and then looked at the monster again. Looking at the hideous and hateful monster, even the people in the Supernatural Bureau who were well informed could not help but shrink their pupils and roll their throats. Zhao Li and the others were even more unbearable. They felt nauseous and almost vomited directly. They also quickly circulated their internal energy to suppress the feeling of vomiting on the spot. Yu Jukan was the same. The situation was urgent just now, and he didn't think too much. Now the situation eased. Looking at the ugly and disgusting monster, his heart naturally twitched and felt uncomfortable. Ah! The girl who laughed with Jiang Wei was even more unbearable. She screamed and fainted. However, Yu Jukan and others at this time could not care about her. They all looked at the monster in front of them with great solemnity. Seeing that his voice had no effect, the four heads of the monster immediately shut up, and the four pairs of fierce eyes stared at everyone for a long time. But in the next moment, the four mouths that had been closed suddenly opened at the same time, and even the corners of the mouths were torn apart, directly to the roots of the ears. Not good. The captain of the supernatural team reacted instantly and shouted in a hurry. However, how could he catch up with the monster that was one step ahead of him? Roar! A terrifying roar came out from the four mouths at the same time, and even the air in front of it was slightly distorted. Along with it, the body of the monster also expanded in an instant, and the 8 arms waved wildly, smashing hard at the people in front of them. However, although they were dizzy from the sudden roar, they still reacted at the critical moment and fought back. Ang! Die! However, although the attacks of the people were sharp, they resisted part of the monster's attack. However, the monster had 8 arms, and it smashed down crazily in turns, which could be called the strongest turtle punch in history. For a moment, facing the overwhelming fists, everyone could only barely parry. And just when everyone was struggling to resist, a scene that made everyone despair occurred. As the attacks of both sides continued to collide, circles of ripples began to appear around, visible to the naked eye. This was naturally not because everyone broke the space, but because the people in the Supernatural Bureau had set up a plan before, covering the entire small world and sealing the energy of the red-clothed evil spirit. Affected by the power generated by the collision of the crowd, it has gradually become turbulent and is on the verge of collapse. After all, this is just a layer of forbidden energy laid by the people of the Spiritual Bureau, using the power of the evil spirit to communicate with this small world. Faced with such a fierce battle collision among the crowd, it is naturally impossible to sustain for a long time. Finally, puff! The layer of energy that sealed the red-clothed evil spirit collapsed in an instant and turned into the spiritual energy of heaven and earth all over the sky. Yes, it is the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. This world is already full of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. It is the energy of the people of the Spiritual Bureau to seal the evil spirit. At first, it was the fusion of the hearts of the people and the energy of the evil spirit. But after the people exerted it outside the body, it was already being eroded by the instinct of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. However, that layer of forbidden energy, after all, contains the power of the will of the hearts of several people in the Spiritual Bureau, and the erosion of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is extremely slow. Moreover, although the spiritual energy of heaven and earth eroded part of the forbidden energy, it did not change its nature. It still firmly sealed the red-clothed evil spirit, which was not noticed by everyone. However, as that layer of forbidden energy collapsed due to the battle among the crowd, it lost its unified centripetal force and was completely eroded by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in an instant, transforming into new spiritual energy of heaven and earth. After the forbidden energy collapsed, naturally, the red-clothed evil spirit that was originally sealed outside of reality gathered the energy in the small world in an instant, remanifested its body, and was reborn again. In just a flash, the red-clothed evil spirit had already arrived in front of the crowd and fiercely clawed at a person from the Spiritual Bureau behind him. Swish! As expected, the person from the Spiritual Bureau had his neck broken by a claw and died on the spot in an instant. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 88. Xuanhuan. Die. Zhou Peng's eyes turned red instantly. His relationship with Xuanhuan, the person killed by the ghost, was the best among everyone. Seeing Xiaoshan's death at this time, Zhou Peng was naturally extremely sad. In an instant, Zhou Peng let go of the restriction on the power of the devil in his body, his face became ferocious and mean, with a faint blue-black color, and he looked at the red-clothed devil with murderous intent, and in one leap, he was already jumped towards it. Zhou Peng, be careful. The moment Zhou Peng turned around, the team leader shouted loudly. Because the moment Zhou Peng turned around and revealed his flaw, the monster with 8 arms and 4 heads had already punched him hard. Although Yu Zhizhen and others attacked desperately, the monster struggled to be injured and withstood the attacks of several people, and still punched Zhou Peng hard on the back. Bang! Not surprisingly, Zhou Peng was knocked several meters away and hit the wall of the opposite classroom. Then he slowly collapsed to the ground, with gurgling blood spilling from his mouth. He didn't know whether he was alive or dead for a moment. So don't be distracted during the battle. Not only will you not get revenge, but you will be killed instead. Ho! But at this moment, Zhang Wuxiao, who had been killed long ago and was lying limply on the ground, got up twitchingly, his eyes were all white, roared in a low voice, and rushed towards Yu Zhizhen who was closest to him. Grass. Although Yu Zhizhen was not shocked when he saw this scene, he just cursed secretly in his heart and kicked him out, without any regard for his former classmates and roommates. Well, if you take care of your classmates at this time, you are really seeking death. Looking at Zhang Wuxiao, who was still full of life and salivating with a bloody hole between his chest and abdomen, Yu Zhizhen cursed and complained in his heart. Damn it, did you create zombies? But looking at the monster with 8 arms and 4 heads, Zhang Wuxiao who turned into a zombie in front of him, and the sinister and vicious red-clothed ghost, Yu Zhizhen fell into extreme despair at this time. If they had known this would happen, they should not have relied on their own cultivation and so-called skills to get involved in such a dangerous thing. Instead, we should leave this experimental building as soon as we break through the alien space and never come closer again. Well, it would be best to transfer to another school immediately and never come back. But obviously, thinking about those things now is meaningless. And just when everyone was ready to give it a try, another change occurred. I saw another shadow slowly emerging in the classroom corridor. And at the moment when this phantom appeared, both the monster Li Gui and Yu Zhizhen and others were obviously stunned. Could it be that there are other ghosts, the will of heaven and earth, in this small world? Thinking of this, Yu Zhizhen and others, who were already in despair, now fell into complete despair. If there was still a glimmer of hope and someone could escape, they might all die here now. However, when the phantom completely solidified, Yu Zhizhen and others were stunned again. This figure was seen wearing ancient uniforms, holding a dark chain, and exuding a cold aura, but it did not appear evil at all, but had a sense of sacred majesty. After this figure appeared, he glanced at everyone with an indifferent expression, making everyone tremble involuntarily. However, the figure's gaze did not stay on the crowd. Instead, his eyes turned and locked on the red-clothed ghost. There was no nonsense at all. The moment the figure completely solidified, he shook the chain in his hand and launched his attack. Seeing this scene, Yu Zhizhen and others subconsciously tightened their bodies and took defensive and attack postures. However, along with the crash sound of gold and iron colliding, this newly appeared person. Well, let's call it a human. One end of the chain in this man's hand has been stretched out like a spiritual snake, and it is quickly entangled towards the red ghost. While being surprised, Yu Zhizhen and others naturally had no intention of stopping them. Instead, they all stepped back 3 points. Regarding the actions of Xuanhuan and others, neither the man holding the chain nor the red-clothed ghost who was the target of the attack paid any attention to them. At this moment, they only have eyes for each other. Looking at the chains that were flying towards him, the ferocious red-clothed ghost who was originally just a ferocious man now showed a dignified expression. Aha! The red figure flashed, and the red-clothed ghost tried to hide behind the man holding the chain, and then launched an attack. After all, it is not strong in terms of strength or defense. It only relies on its ability to shuttle freely in this small world to carry out covert sneak attacks. However, while his body flashed, he did not move away from the original place, which caused his expression to change. Although he did not have complete consciousness, he still had instinctive reactions to the outside world. The changes that occurred at this time were obviously far beyond its expectations. Killing it like before or even sealing it away from the world would not make it difficult for it to accept. However, the chain's attack at this time was far beyond its expectations. What is it? Although it has the characteristics of a fierce ghost, in essence, it is the pseudo-heaven and earth will of this small world. Shuttle in this small world, it was originally as easy as moving hands and feet. But at this time, the chain was broken, and its ability to shuttle freely in this small world naturally shocked it. Seeing that the space shuttle was ineffective, the red-clothed ghost fluttered and wanted to avoid the entanglement attack of the chain. If it was just waiting solemnly before, then after the chain broke its space shuttle, it was already very cautious and would never let the chain come to it. However, sometimes the development of things is not subject to personal will. The red-clothed ghost's originally erratic and agile figure now seemed to be stuck in a quagmire, and the movement speed became extremely slow. And the entangled chain was like lightning. In just a moment, the figure of the red-clothed ghost had just moved less than a foot, and the rattling chain had already come to it. Like a dancing spirit snake, the dark chain tied up the red-clothed ghost tightly with a clattering sound. After tying up the red-clothed ghost, the figure holding the chain suddenly pulled the chain hard, and the red-clothed ghost floated in front of him involuntarily. Of course, this was definitely not the red-clothed ghost's will, but no matter how hard it struggled, it could not move at all, and could only let the figure do whatever it wanted. It was as if the inconspicuous dark chain was the strongest seal in the world, sealing everything of the red-clothed ghost, the energy in the body, the ability to become virtual, and the power of space shuttle, all of which were imprisoned, making it impossible for it to escape. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 89. When Xuanhuan and others saw the sudden appearance of the figure and easily captured the devil, they were delighted but also extremely shocked. They didn't know what kind of methods this person had used. Involuntarily, everyone's eyes turned to the figure holding the chain. And looking at that figure, with the red-clothed fierce ghost bound by the chains in his hands, the more everyone looked at it, the more familiar it seemed. This is Ghost Error. Looking at the familiar figure, Zhao Li whispered to himself, although there was a hint of uncertainty in his tone. But looking at his expression, he had already concluded that this was a ghost. Ghost. Except for the unconscious girl, there was no ordinary person present. Although Zhao Li's voice was low, he did not suppress it deliberately, and everyone naturally heard it clearly. Everyone turned around suddenly and glanced at Zhao Li, then turned their heads instantly and locked their eyes on the person holding the chain, or the ghost. Perhaps something was touched. The ghost man holding the chain instantly turned his head and locked his gaze on Zhao Li. He was covered in cold sweat and his body was trembling slightly, as if he was locked by some great terror. After another moment, the ghost with the chain finally withdrew his gaze. Immediately, Goichai glanced at everyone again. Fortunately, he only glanced at them and locked his eyes on the monster with 8 arms and 4 heads. Wow! The chains tied to the red-clothed ghost. Well, that should be the legendary hook. At this time, The rope that bound the red-clothed ghost seemed to be able to extend infinitely. It quickly extended again and wrapped around the monster. Roar! Hoo ho ho! Naturally, the monster couldn't sit still and wait for death, so it directly launched its strongest attack. However, neither the impact of its loud roar nor its 8 arms waving crazily had any impact on the soul hook. It was as if the dark seductive rope was illusory, passing directly through his waving arms and wrapping around his body. However, although the soul hook rope wrapped around his body, it did not seem to affect him, and his arms could still move normally. Even its entire body can move freely. At this time, the monster was moving its 8 long legs and rushing towards the ghost. Looking at that posture, it looked like he was about to smash Kazan into a meat pie. Facing the monster's impact, Kazan's expression did not change at all. Well, in his mind, apart from the seduction, there was only confusion and chaos. There was no other way of thinking, he didn't know what fear was, and he didn't even have any emotions. Naturally, it was impossible to react in any other way. Even when he looked at Zhao Li, it was only because Zhao Li mentioned ghost missions that he instinctively looked at him. But even so, it has no other meaning, it is just a simple gaze. As for Zhao Li's reaction, it was more of his own psychological effect. A small part of it is because the two have the aura of heaven and earth at the same time, and in terms of personality, Goicha is a ghost and god who belongs to the ghosts and ghosts of Kunali, the underworld, and will naturally suppress Zhao Li to a certain extent. Coupled with psychological effects, this created his unbearable appearance. After all, facing ghosts from the underworld, everyone will feel frightened. Coupled with a certain degree of personal suppression, it will naturally become even more unbearable. Looking at the monster that was about to rush forward, Gaza had no intention of avoiding it, but just gently tugged on the hook in his hand. Wow! There was a sound of gold and iron colliding, and the rope in his hand suddenly tightened. Immediately, there was a phantom, and the rope in his hand was pulled out directly from the monster's body. The phantom drawn out from the monster's body also had 8 legs, 8 hands, and 4 heads, and looked ferocious and weird. After the monster was pulled out of its phantom, the weird appearance was instantly dismembered, with various limbs and arms broken off, and minced meat and internal organs scattered on the ground. Yujujhan and others retched as they looked at it. As for Gazeo, he didn't have any reaction to these, but after seeing the appearance of the shadow, his originally indifferent expression turned into a slight frown, looking a little disgusted. Involuntarily, Goicha instinctively shook the soul hook in his hand, and the strange-looking shadow suddenly let out a shrill scream. At the beginning, their screams were still coming out at the same time, without any distinction between them. But as time went on, the screams began to distinguish between men and women, as well as the difference in pitch. Final. Ah! Accompanied by 4 different shrill screams, the phantoms that were originally the fusion of the 4 people suddenly dispersed, and Hua became 4 different phantoms of men and women, tightly bound by the soul-stirring rope. These 4 shadows were the other 2 people in Yujujhan's dormitory, as well as 2 other girls. After the 4 people appeared, they first looked around in confusion, then as if they had remembered something, they showed fear, which eventually turned into sadness. Apparently he remembered his previous encounters and understood his current situation. Ah Cheng, I really regret not listening to your advice. Oh, what's the point of talking about this now? Yujujhan also let out a long sigh, showing a sad look, and was also shocked. He didn't expect that Goicha could separate the fused ghosts again and restore their sanity. Should we say that he is indeed a ghost who specializes in catching resentful spirits and evil spirits? He has a natural power of restraint and control over these ghosts and evil spirits. But why? Everyone looked at the red-clothed evil spirit, wondering why it had no intention of regaining consciousness. But obviously, the ghost did not intend to explain to everyone. Well, the ghost also ignored everyone's actions and conversations, as if he would not pay attention to anyone or anything as long as it did not interfere with his arrest of resentful spirits and evil spirits. However, ignoring Yujukan and others does not mean that he ignores another person, or another zombie. As the ghost shook his wrist, the soul-catching rope made a rustling sound, and one end turned into a snake again and went towards the zombie transformed by Zhang Xiao. Facing the soul-catching rope that was entangled, the zombie transformed by Zhang Xiao did not feel any fear, but instead roared violently and grabbed the soul-catching rope. Then, nothing happened, only a shadow appeared beside the ghost messenger, which was the dead Zhang Xiao. His body had already collapsed on the ground, without any movement. Yujukan and others who watched all this finally confirmed in their hearts that this was the legendary ghost messenger from the underworld. But this time, with Zhao Li's previous experience, no one spoke rashly. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 90. After Zhang Xiao's soul was also captured by ghosts, everyone thought that the matter was over. Next, Gazao should return to the netherworld with a group of ghosts. Gazan looked at another place. There was a man with his body and head separated, lying quietly on the ground. Well, he can't even move. Wow! The soul hook spread, twisting and tugging on his body, and a translucent soul shadow was pulled out by him. Only then did everyone remember that there was another member of the Supernatural Bureau who was killed by the red-clothed ghost. For a while, they were silent and sad again. However, when everyone looked at the soul of this member of the Supernatural Bureau, they were shocked to discover. The souls of this member of the Supernatural Bureau are completely different from the souls of Zhang Xiao and the others. A strange black mist is wrapped around the soul of this member of the Supernatural Bureau. And in this black mist, there are even more ferocious and twisted faces, constantly surrounding the souls of the members of the Supernatural Bureau. And with every bite of that ghost face, its soul will instantly become a little more transparent, but it will swallow a part of the black mist and regain it. However, after swallowing the black mist, its soul gradually turned black, obviously being constantly eroded by the black mist. Seeing this situation, although Yujujhan and others were surprised, they also vaguely guessed that this should be the reason for sealing the fierce ghost. Maybe that weird black mist is the power of the ghost, or even the ghost itself. I just didn't expect that if the power of the evil spirit was sealed in the body, after death, it would be corroded by the power of the evil spirit, and it should eventually fall into a new evil spirit. It is really ironic to think about using the power of evil ghosts to fight against evil ghosts for the sake of human beings in life, but after death, they turned into new evil ghosts and harmed human beings. This is really an ironic thing. However, Gazan did not react much to the black mist above these souls. He only shook the soul-grabbing rope slightly, and the black mist above his soul was swallowed up by the soul-grabbing rope, causing his soul to, and regained consciousness. And everyone who watched all this happen, while being happy for the member of the Supernatural Bureau, was also shocked by Gazashi's ability. Everyone even felt that the ghost's hook had become darker and brighter after absorbing the black mist. But immediately, everyone shook their heads secretly. This was the legendary ghost mission. Although that black mist is the power of a fierce ghost. However, since it can be locked in the body of a determined person, how much power can it contain? How is it possible to increase the power of the ghost's weapon, the soul-catching rope? It must be everyone's illusion. However, in fact, everyone did not feel wrong. The soul hook in Guichai's hand did become more powerful after swallowing the black mist, that is, the negative power of Li Gui. After all, seriously speaking, not to mention it is a ghost, even the ghost himself is just an existence that evolved from the leakage of a few people's thoughts, the gathering of information and ideas, and the special environment of the prehistoric world. Even if it absorbs a large amount of spiritual energy from heaven and earth, in essence, it is much weaker than the soul of an ordinary person, let alone the soul hook of its weapon. As for The reason why he can easily see souls is that the red-clothed ghosts who are considered as the will of this small world and fake the world are also easily captured by him. All I can say is that this is personal suppression, and it is the natural restraint power of ghosts over ghosts. Well, you said that this ghost is just a ghost in the underworld that evolved from the illusory world of prehistoric times and the minds and wills of a few people. What qualifications does it have to restrain the ghosts in the real world, even the red-clothed ghosts who are the will of the fake world? Haha, it was naturally not possible, but when a large number of spiritual energy particles filled every corner of this small world, the situation changed drastically. As mentioned before, the aura of heaven and earth can be regarded as an extension of Yuan Meng's spiritual power. After Yuan Meng does not exercise any control and allows it to flow on its own, it is extremely susceptible to the influence of the spiritual spirit and will spontaneously and slowly converge towards it. Under normal circumstances, this gathering speed is extremely slow, and even due to the influence of the body and mind, even if there is a gathering of spiritual energy, it mostly lingers outside everyone's body and has no impact on everyone. But in this small world, the rules are extremely loose. Just the dissipation of ordinary mental thoughts can create a ghost that fakes the will of the world. At the moment of death, the activity of the spiritual will be greatly enhanced in an instant, even enough to disturb the superficial rules of the world in the small world, and use them to gather the energy in the small world, forming a soul body. However, this small world is now filled with a large amount of spiritual energy from heaven and earth. When energy is gathered, what is really heavily influenced by the spirit is naturally the aura of heaven and earth that is more susceptible to the influence of spiritual will. Even if there is a part of little heaven and earth's own power that is absorbed by it, it will be quickly eroded and assimilated by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and transformed into the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. However, after all, it has also absorbed part of the power of small world, so it will still be affected to a certain extent. It is precisely because of this that the two roommates of Yujukin's dormitory, as well as the other two girls, were forcibly fused into a monster with 8 arms and 4 heads under the influence of the red ghost. And Zhang Wuxiao was also transformed into a zombie-like monster afterwards. In fact, if everyone did not absorb the energy of this small world, but simply absorbed and integrated the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, they would only form a virtual consciousness body, and retain their consciousness and even memory. Well, at that time, they could actually be called ghosts. They were also illusory and could not touch the things in the real world, but they could also combine the spiritual energy of heaven and earth that was integrated with them to indirectly affect the spirit of ordinary people and make them produce various illusions. They could even touch real objects again after absorbing enough spiritual energy of heaven and earth. After all, the Yuanli formed by Yujukin and others with the spirit of spirit and spirit combined with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth could cause certain real damage, not just simply acting on people's hearts and minds. As a ghost formed by the human spirit and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, when it becomes strong enough and absorbs enough spiritual energy from heaven and earth, it can naturally interfere with reality. Even if the spirit is strong enough, after absorbing enough spiritual energy from heaven and earth, it can also form a physical body condensed by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, just like everything in the prehistoric world. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 91. The spiritual will of the dead, the soul body formed by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, can indeed protect the integrity of a person's spiritual will to a certain extent. It is still like having a body, and can think independently and have complete spiritual intelligence. However, everything has its pros and cons, and it is not without side effects. At least in Yuan Meng's eyes, it can be clearly seen that the spiritual will of Zhang Wuxiao and others, although combined with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, has formed a soul body. However, after losing the protection and nourishment of the body, their spiritual consciousness is actually in a state of gradual dissipation. And the spiritual energy of heaven and earth that was gathered and integrated by them is also constantly escaping from their control because of the gradual dissipation of spiritual consciousness, and has become ownerless spiritual energy of heaven and earth again. The manifestation is that their soul bodies are constantly emitting a little spiritual light, and are constantly changing towards transparency. Of course, this transformation speed is extremely slow and not very obvious. Whether it is Yu Jukan and others, or Zhang Wuxiao and himself, they are not aware of it at all. As for the scattered spiritual light, it is even more beyond their perception. However, not being able to feel it does not mean that it does not exist. In any case, as long as Zhang Wuxiao and others cannot change their current state, it may not be long before they will completely dissipate and die again. Well, this seems to be not much different from the legendary ghosts. Those legendary souls, after being unable to enter the underworld, can only become lonely ghosts, and finally their souls will be scattered and completely dissipated between heaven and earth. Of course, the souls will be scattered, and that will be a matter for the future, so there is no need to consider it now. After all, they are about to be taken to the underworld by the ghost messenger. With the idealistic nature of the prehistoric world, as long as they do not have a mental breakdown, they can still maintain their existence for a long time. But let's not talk about these first. What I want to say at this time is that it is precisely because Zhang Wuxiao and others have absorbed a lot of spiritual energy from heaven and earth. In the end, even the small amount of energy from the small world that they absorbed was eroded by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and was also transformed into spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Among them, the red-clothed evil spirit, which is a pseudo-heaven and earth consciousness, actually absorbed and integrated a large amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy. After all, it is a bit of a stretch to say that the red-clothed evil spirit is the heaven and earth consciousness, and it cannot really mobilize much energy from the small world. When it died and was reborn, although it seemed to be extremely fast, it seemed to have absorbed enough energy in an instant. In fact, it was not the case. After death, when it was reborn, although it absorbed the energy of the small world, it absorbed more of the energy that dissipated in the small world when it died before. After all, those energies were once part of its body. Before the spiritual imprint in the small world was completely erased and reintegrated into the small world, it could naturally be easily remastered by the red-clothed evil spirit and gathered again to form a body. However, as the small world was filled with heaven and earth spiritual energy, and every time it died, the energy that collapsed and scattered from the body would be transformed by the heaven and earth spiritual energy. In this way, time and time again, the body it reformed naturally integrated more and more heaven and earth spiritual energy. Even in the end, the body formed by the red-clothed evil spirit, except for a small part of the energy of the small world it absorbed, was mostly composed of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Coupled with the continuous erosion of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, when the ghost came, the body of the red-clothed evil spirit was already completely composed of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. In fact, only the red-clothed evil spirit did not have a complete mind, otherwise, although it was only the pseudo-consciousness of the world in this small world. However, it was also the consciousness of the world in the small world after all. How could it not be aware of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth that filled the entire small world but was different from the energy of the small world? Even without any defense, it directly reassembled a new body with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. As for the ghost, although in essence, it was not stronger than Zhang Wuxiao and the red-clothed evil spirit, it was even weaker. However, this ghost was the first ghost in the prehistoric world, and it could even be said to be the second living being in the prehistoric world. His status in the prehistoric world is naturally of a very high kind. No matter how many ghost messengers are born in the future, Even if they are ox-headed horse-face, black and white impermanence, they will be slightly inferior to him in status. Even though he is only a ghost messenger now. However, if he works hard enough and has a little luck and opportunity, he may not be unable to become the Yin Emperor of the new underworld, surpassing the 5 ghost emperors and the 10 kings of hell. It is precisely because of this that when they belong to the same prehistoric world system, the ghost messenger's status suppression of ghosts will be so vividly highlighted, making many ghosts and evil spirits have no power to resist. Well, it is mainly because when facing the ghost messenger, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth will spontaneously enter a state of inertia. This is because the ghost messenger imagined by Yujukan and others can be so easily arrested when facing ghosts. And the ghost messenger formed by the information carried by the fragments of Yujukan's spiritual will, and then recognized by the Hades Emperor or Yuan Meng. Those soul bodies formed by gathering the spiritual energy of heaven and earth with spiritual will, when facing the ghost messenger, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth that makes up their souls will instantly enter a state of inertia and become difficult to control. This is a root setting of the prehistoric world, and it is also the essence of the so-called personality gap. Yuan Meng said that the innate gods in the prehistoric world have high personalities. When facing other ordinary creatures, they will form a certain level of personality suppression, preventing them from exerting their full power. Then the status of the innate gods is extremely high. This is a setting engraved on the roots of the prehistoric world. It is inevitable for everyone to belong to the prehistoric world. Of course, as the saying goes, the great Dao is 50, Tianyan is 49, and one of them can escape. In Yuan Meng's setting, this kind of personal suppression is not completely unbreakable. As long as you have a strong mental will, you can be immune to this kind of personal suppression to a certain extent. However, without an extremely strong spiritual will, which can be used to forcibly control the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the body, it will indeed be suppressed when facing the existence of a higher level. Unless you can break through the innate limitations and then upgrade your own personality dimension. But no matter which one, extremely strong spiritual will, breaking through innate limitations, and upgrading one's own personal dimension are not something that ordinary people like Zhang Wuxiao can do. As for the red-clothed ghost, before he had complete intelligence and could figure it all out, decisively carry out self-destruction and rebirth, and break the shackles of the aura of heaven and earth. With his chaotic mental will, it is naturally impossible for a body formed by relying on the aura of heaven and earth to break free from the ghostly hook. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 92. The ghost officer glanced at the people in the supernatural bureau again at the end, frowning slightly as if he had sensed something. However, the soul-catching rope in his hand made a clattering sound, which frightened Yujukan and others, and their faces changed wildly, but he did not move in the end. This is because everyone has been in this small world for a long time, and even had a fierce battle. Now the spiritual will in their bodies, including the strange and evil ghost power sealed in their bodies, have been eroded by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to a certain extent. To a certain extent, they have also formed a trace of the embryonic form of the soul body in their bodies. Of course, this is nothing. Even if they really form a soul body, the ghost officer will not attack them. After all, the ghost officer cannot arbitrarily arrest the souls of living people. That violates the reincarnation of heaven and earth and the order of humanity, and will be punished by heaven and earth. What made the ghost officer feel was the strange and evil ghost power in everyone's body. However, after all, the time was short, and the ghost officer's perception of the situation in everyone's body was naturally limited. Otherwise, the strange and evil spirit power in everyone's body, after combining with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, can also be regarded as a kind of incomplete soul. Since the ghost has already come in front of him, he naturally doesn't mind arresting him. After all, the ghost's soul snatching is to maintain the order of heaven and earth and the order of the human world. it will naturally not leave the residual soul that disrupts the order of the human world and destroys the reincarnation of heaven and earth alone. However, after all, the time is short, and everyone is not too infected by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. In addition, the personal spiritual will and the shielding of the life force field, the ghost can't clearly feel the location of the residual soul. If he has complete spiritual intelligence and normal cognition, he will naturally make some inquiries. It's a pity that the first ghost in this prehistoric world does not have complete spiritual intelligence, let alone normal cognition of the world. Therefore, the ghost just glanced at everyone, and after not noticing, he didn't do it after all, and didn't ask about everyone's situation. Instead, he looked at the many ghosts and evil spirits tied by the soul-snatching rope. Feeling the ghost's gaze, Zhang Wuxiao and others who were still talking suddenly stopped talking and looked at the ghost with nervous expressions. There was no way, although the legendary ghost seemed not to hurt people's souls. But who could know the details? They were now in the hands of the ghost, and their lives and deaths depended on the ghost's thoughts, so they were naturally nervous. However, the ghost did not pay attention to the meaning of the crowd, but just shook the soul-catching rope in his hands slightly. Hualala! A hidden force swept along the soul-catching rope. And those Zhang Wuxiao and others who were tied up by it, including the red-clothed ghost, all felt that their heads were hit hard by something, and all felt that their brains were confused and their hearts became blank. In the eyes of Yu Jukan, who was outside, as the ghost shook the soul-catching rope, Zhang Wuxiao and others became dazed and their eyes became empty in an instant. He just looked at the ghost messenger, standing there quietly, without the fear he had before, and ignored Yu Jukan and others, as if he had never known them. After doing all this, the ghost messenger pulled the soul-catching rope in his hand again, turned around and walked out, and the ghosts and evil spirits tied by the soul-catching rope were dazed and also floated forward. After just a few steps, the ghost messenger's figure began to become illusory. And there was a hazy shadow of the pass gate, looming in front of the ghost messenger, with the words Ghost Gate written on it, 3 ghostly, but majestic and lawful characters. When the ghost messenger led a group of ghosts and evil spirits into the ghost gate, he disappeared in an instant. Looking at the empty classroom corridor, Yu Jukan and others felt as if they were in a dream. Just feeling the pain on their bodies, the mess on the ground, Zhang Wuxiao who died on the spot, and the member of the Supernatural Bureau whose neck was broken, everyone naturally would not think that it was just an illusion. While everyone breathed a sigh of relief, they looked at Zhou Peng again. Just now, although the ghost was constantly arresting souls, he did not arrest the soul of Zhou Peng who was limp in the corner. And with the ghost's sensitivity to the soul, Yu Jukan and others did not think that the ghost did not notice Zhou Peng. There is only one possibility, that is, Zhou Peng is not really dead. Thinking of this, everyone was shocked, and quickly came to Zhou Peng's side, carefully feeling his breathing and pulse with the back of their hands. Still breathing. Although it was extremely weak, Zhou Peng did have a slight breath, which made everyone very happy. Quick! Quick! Call an ambulance! In an instant, everyone began to get busy quickly, calling an ambulance while also treating his injuries. After all, they were all fighting at the forefront, so some simple injuries were easy to deal with. In the villa at the foot of Qingping Mountain, Yuan Meng had been watching here. But at the moment when the ghost disappeared, he had already mobilized the spiritual energy of this small world. At a level that was not noticeable to everyone, with the spiritual energy of the entire small world, he imitated the previous ban made by the Supernatural Bureau, formed a kind of spiritual force field, and banned the arrival of the red-clothed ghost. Well, although the ghost messenger looked powerful, even the red-clothed evil spirit, which was the consciousness of heaven and earth, was easily suppressed by him. But in fact, what he suppressed was only the external manifestation of the red-clothed evil spirit. If it were not for its incomplete spiritual intelligence, it would have returned to heaven and earth with its spiritual will, absorbed the energy of the small world, and reformed its body to come to the world. And it was the kind of small world energy body that was not suppressed and controlled by the ghost messenger. Therefore, when the ghost messenger brought the red-clothed evil spirit back to the gate of hell, the red-clothed evil spirit was equivalent to death in this small world. If Yuan Meng had not acted quickly enough, I am afraid that at this moment, the red-clothed evil spirit would have been reborn again. In this way, everything the ghost messenger did before became useless, and it really had no style at all. However, the quasi-psychic force field laid by Yuan Meng was not comparable to the ban laid by the Spiritual Bureau before. Even if the red-clothed evil spirit was 10 times stronger, it could not break through the force field generated by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Moreover, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is originally composed of countless scattered spiritual energy particles, so it is naturally not afraid of the destruction of battle. The reason why they can form a unified spiritual force field is that they all belong to Yuan Meng and can resonate with each other, thus forming a force field covering all spiritual energy particles.